Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, the imaginary Central American migrant caravan, the one you've been told over and over doesn't exist, and if you don't believe it, you're immoral. Well, it turns out it does exist. It's a physical reality, and in fact, it's here. It's at the U.S. border. A breakaway group from the Caravan has made its way to Tijuana. They didn't walk, as you were told they were doing. They were driven, and now members are climbing over the border fence there. The migrants are able to reach this country thanks to the assistance of organizations whose explicit purpose is getting people into this country legally or not. Trace Gallagher has more details on what's going on tonight. Trace?
Tucker, right now there are two primary Central American caravans in Mexico making their way north that include anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 people. The first of the major caravans is expected to arrive at the U.S. border sometime late next week. But as you say, some 350 migrants have now arrived at the border in Tijuana. Dozens of them scaled a fence and taunted Border Patrol officers. Others stood at the fence or hung out on the beach. But they want their presence known to both the Border Patrol and the media. Watch this.
Dura, papi. Puro dura, puro catracho.
Yeah, catracho is slang for Honduran. There are reports these migrants broke from the main caravan about 4 or 5 days ago and took buses north. Impossible to tell exactly how many are from the caravan because the Border Patrol tells us Central American migrants sometimes arrive in droves every single day at the U.S. border. We certainly know that many of these migrants are being coached by groups like Pueblos Sin Fronteras or People Without Borders, a Chicago-based immigration advocacy group. In fact, even left-leaning news organizations like the L.A. Times and Washington Post have reported that members of Pueblos Sin Fronteras are embedded with the caravan. And our sources tell us these types of groups are guiding the migrants. For example, Mexico has offered most of these people both asylum and jobs, and yet they continue heading north. Also, they could move toward the U.S. border in Texas, but instead they go the long way, hundreds of miles out of their way toward Tijuana, and that's because the goal is to get to California, to take advantage of the state's sanctuary laws and the benefits that go along with that. Of course, once thousands begin arriving in the next few weeks, sympathetic groups will be at the border to greet them. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks for that update. Appreciate it. Well, the images you just saw are embarrassing and awkward for the liars you've been watching on television for the past month, the ones who've been lecturing you that the caravan doesn't exist and telling you that everything is just fine at the border.
The president, along with his favorite TV network, were beating the drum on the looming so-called invasion, as they put it.
The programming on the caravan was propaganda. It was political campaign-motivated propaganda.
Trump is like a racist Paul Revere, you know, the migrants are coming, the migrants are coming. He keeps calling it an invasion. Yes, an invasion of strollers.
He made news by ratcheting up the caravan scare talk and the troop numbers he believes are needed to meet this alleged threat.
The so-called invasion, so people are streaming over the border illegally, what would you call it? I don't know. You're not allowed to call it anything, actually. This is a recurring theme on the left. Don't believe your own eyes. You're too dumb to trust your own senses. Listen to the smart kids. They know best. There's no crisis on the border. Even as hundreds of thousands of people stream into this country every year illegally, there's no illegal immigration crisis. Yeah, there are 22 million people living here illegally. It's not a crisis. It's not real. They'll tell you that on a loop endlessly until the day they retake power, at which point they'll say the crisis is real. In fact, it's so enormous, we can only solve it by granting blanket amnesty to all the people here illegally. There are 22 million, after all. What else can we do? This is a metaphor, really, for the left's entire program, which is built entirely on denying reality. They deny the reality of illegal immigration. They deny the reality of terrorism. They deny the reality of biological gender. And woe to the person who raises his hand and tries to insert reality into the conversation. They don't want that. When you have a program built entirely on denial and deception, it's not surprising you're also against free speech. You can't afford to have an honest conversation. We'd like to have an honest conversation. That's why we're speaking tonight to Brian Dean Wright. He's a Democrat and a former CIA officer, and he joins us on set. So I think there are arguments in favor of letting these people in, even illegally. That's a real position.
Sure.
And maybe you can make the case that it's good for America, it's good for our economy, or maybe you think it's bad for America and you want it anyway. I mean, there are all kinds of arguments. But what's not an argument is telling me that I'm a racist for acknowledging the reality of what is happening. And that's the position I'm seeing on television.
You're correct. So here's where we should be starting with this conversation. Facts, which we typically don't, right? So the facts tell us that first-generation immigrants are a net drain on our economy. Second, that then eventually third-generation become net contributors. That's the fact, right?
Right.
Secondarily, we know that the folks who are coming across the border, 1,000 to 2,000 people each day, again, having kids then in a year or 2 years down the road, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people all told, that those folks are initially anyway, a burden to our economy. Now, whether or not they contribute something many years down the road, that is an open question. We should be able to have this conversation irrespective of our party affiliation and come to a conclusion where we say, look, we need to have a thoughtful, strong border, prevent some of these folks from coming across, and if we don't, shame on us as a country.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I do think, as you just said, that this is in many ways an economic question, and I don't understand how you can look at the projections for what automation is about to do to our economy, eliminating a huge percentage of all low-skilled labor in this country, and say what we need is more low-skilled labor. How can you make that argument?
You can't. The top 10 jobs that we see immigrants take, both legal and illegal, make less than $20 an hour, which, by the way, the Obama administration said jobs earning less than $20 an hour are going to be automated into obsolescence. So the argument that we need an increasing number of poorly qualified, folks who don't speak English, don't have the skill sets that really we need for the coming economy, or frankly the one that's already here, that's a silly argument. It doesn't hold water.
So I always want to believe the best about people and that they have honorable motives, and I think most people do have honorable motives. But if you can't even marshal an economic argument in favor of your immigration policy, I'm left believing maybe it's only about getting more votes for your party.
How cynical.
I don't want to be cynical. I just don't see any other rationale.
Look, I appreciate the argument. I think you may be correct. There are definitely some parts of the party, make no mistake about it, they want open borders. I mean, just the other day, I think it was yesterday, in fact, Senator Gillibrand from New York was buddy-buddy with a guy, Sean McElwee, who wants to remove the border between the United States and Mexico. All right, so there is an element within this country, not just in the activist community, but in fact within the left of this nation, my own party, I hate to say, who want open borders. And that, of course, then feeds into this issue, well, not only how do we take care of them, but ultimately who are they going to vote for? And that there is a play there that I think one could argue that this is a political play. This is about votes. So I think it's fair to have that concern and that fear.
If I hear one more moron on cable news cry racism when somebody tries to have an honest conversation about what this means, I swear I'm getting rid of my television. I mean that.
I don't blame you.
Can't handle it.
Yeah.
Brian D. Wright, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Great to see you. Well, the Florida recount continues tonight. Democrats are battling to change the results by any means necessary. That will not surprise you. The details might, though, and we have them after the break.